Welcome to the School of Public Affairs and Administration's Writing Method Series. These seminars are designed to help Rutgers students develop their academic materials for public administration courses. This writing method session will cover expanding your analysis, spotting fake news. My name is Terry Hall, Director of the Writing and Career Development Center, and I'll be guiding us through this seminar. Our first step in analysis is to define the problem. What's the primary argument or thesis of your paper? What specific issues are being addressed by the paper? Who's the target audience? What's the purpose of the text? Is the purpose of your paper to inform us, persuade us, entertain us primarily? Is it all three? Which resources are best? And which types of details will best illustrate your point? What types of ideas, facts, are there numbers that you can provide? What's the best approach? Our next step is to find out, well, what's already been written about the topic. So use a variety of online and offline sources for significant data. You want to cast a broad net ideally. You want to focus on your specific issue, but you also want to look at what surrounding issues are also impacted. Oftentimes in public administration, an issue that affects the city may also affect various departments at the same time. And we have to define what type of communication is happening, and then also what's the impact of the work that our representatives are doing. Then we want to narrow the search to specifics about the topic. Always cross-reference your resources. That is to say, if you find information in one place, you want to find similar information that will support it, or even information that will knock it down in order to determine what's the most valuable data for your own research. You want to make sure to use organizational information, government websites, online news sources, academic journals, peer-reviewed articles, public administration periodicals, and there's various watchdog groups, privately the Better Business Bureau, but also when it comes to nonprofits, organizations like GuideStar that will look to collect information on the legislation and organizational activity at hand, and also critique us and let us know what type of information will be most beneficial to serve the public. And then also you want to primarily use primary sources. In this case, a lot of the time you might start with a secondary source, and it's worth it to follow the trail of breadcrumbs and see who wrote the articles that are being referenced in the resources you're reading, then maybe finding those people and continuing to dig until you found the source of the idea. A lot of the time when you're working with primary sources, it can provide inspiration and understanding that's different from the secondary source. All of the information is valuable, so use what you have at your disposal. Don't leave obvious stones unturned. In this case, the idea is low-hanging fruit is important. If you're currently serving in a capacity or a member of the community or happen to be acting in a way that is influencing the work that you're doing as a student, then you might want to start there. In this case, use professional experience. If you happen to work in an office that reports the data that they collect, or if you happen to be able to interview or talk to individuals within the organization for insight or advice, that could be valuable in influencing how your paper unfolds or how your project unfolds. But it's also notable that you should only use information that is publicly available or with express permission should you decide to pull from personal experiences. Also, you should look at stated objectives, resources, and operations. So if you go to an organization's website, typically the About Us section will include things like a mission, a value statements, vision statements. Organizations are also very good about publishing activity that they may have done concerning community engagement. And oftentimes annual reports are worthwhile to look at because organizations will talk about their donors and their activities when they are involved in something that they believe will be positive for them, but also have an impact on their target audience. Make sure as well that you pay attention to what's going on in the news when things are relevant. because a lot of the time, public administration is the application of our skill sets theoretically and also conceptually as applied to the real world events going on. We oftentimes will look to research or history in order to try and determine a pathway forward. Pay attention to fake news. In this particular case, fake news is defined as news that does not have the appropriate citations, the appropriate critical evidence to support it, news that oftentimes can easily fall into bias or hearsay, essentially things that we avoid in public administration by citing our sources. In this case, utilizing APA format and making sure that we provide the author, the year, the page number, and any other relevant supporting environmental information that will really be helpful in providing both context and authenticity to what we're doing. Oftentimes, transparency and accountability are important, so we want to start by being critical. We want to ask questions: who, what, where, when, why, how. Also, how many, how much. These are questions that should always be in our minds, because these are the things that will actually allow us to find stones that we might have not uncovered yet, or make connections that we may have previously thought of before we started getting more in depth in our studies. Be objective. Be mindful of subjective biases to the best of your ability. Avoid I think, avoid I feel, avoid I believe. Another way of thinking of this is avoid I, me, my, or we. The reason that we want to do this is because personalization can oftentimes undercut the points that we're making, and also it keeps us from generalizing and making things and allowing things to be interpreted the wrong way. You want to look objectively at the pros and the cons. You want to see what different audiences are saying, if there's positives or negatives, and if you find something that undercuts your argument, you want to approach it head on. In this particular case, addressing it outright in your paper is oftentimes helpful, and then making an argument to support your own position or to modify it is usually a strong idea. Make sure to confirm important dates and details. As I've said earlier, we always need the author's name, the date, and the source of the information. So author, year, and then page numbers, but also anything else that can indicate how we can quickly find the information is usually very helpful. Make sure that you read closely. Close reading is important because if you summarize, you can oftentimes get a very good understanding of the frame of a discussion. But if you look more closely at the language used, or if you look more closely at the theories behind the intent, or if you look at perhaps what the people who are speaking actually want, what they're petitioning for, then you'll oftentimes find more room for analysis than you might have at a glance. Beware of misleading information. If you see selectively edited photographs, video that doesn't seem like it is being edited in a way that is fair and an accurate representation of the subject matter, if you see visual data that seems like it might be off, it's probably worth double checking at least. It's usually best to have a few sources to verify the same information. If you found it on a website that you frequent that has news, then check it with another news article. If the information is supposed to be well known across the board, then make sure that you check it maybe in an encyclopedia and find additional sources through that encyclopedia that you can also consult if you're really not certain about the quality of the information you have. Also, pay attention to vague details. So, dead giveaways typically are general language that never get any closer to the specifics that would help you to make up your mind, make a decision. Distant places that you've never been to or you don't know all that much about. And then also esoteric information. That's typically inside information that you got to be a real expert to understand. It's very normal for organizations in public administration to present information to the public through their own lens or through their own language. And if that's the case, then you as a student might need to interpret some of that information for the layman or communicate directly at the appropriate rate that fits your class and the intentions of the project. Be selective about the quotes that you choose. All quotes aren't created equal. Some are better than others. And we would define better as a quote that is more illustrative of the point that you'd like to make in the paper or addresses an issue in the paper that's very important. While all quotes can, well, I shouldn't say all, many quotes can be valuable to supporting your ideas, remember that the quotes are just support for your ideas and your voice. When you're selecting a quote, make sure to read the passages that come before it and after it to make sure that you've understood it in the proper context. And when you can, also look at the other contextual relationships about the topic. When you're using quotes, it's important that you cite them appropriately. So be accurate, make sure that you document the text itself appropriately. You want to be able to ideally find the information that you're citing in your paper or in your project within a few minutes of looking through your own notes and files. If you can do that easily, then you've cited things appropriately, and it will most likely be easy for your instructor to do the same. Make sure to use quotes from authorities on the subject to support or refute your argument. The key stakeholders that you want to bring to the table oftentimes will provide information that is expertise that you yourself may not feel qualified to explain, but if you quote it appropriately, then that expert language can then be discussed through the analysis after the quote by you. And also, it can help us gain an understanding of of how much the author is diving into the topic and how much they're actually able to answer. It's worth noting that information, particularly that is new or current, is still evolving. And so you want to make sure that you give us the appropriate documentation for it so that if something changes or something turns out to be later disproven, then there's still integrity to the process that you've undergone in your paper. Make sure that your voice is heard, and that's typically done in structure beyond just analysis. So that typically means make sure that your voice is strong in your introduction, especially your thesis sentence or primary argument. Make sure that your voice is strong in the topic sentences, and make sure that your voice is strong in the conclusion. Also, use quotes because quotes will allow for distinct language to be used that you're not typically used to, as previously mentioned, but it can be difficult to paraphrase some ideas, and a quote can do that for you instead of you reinventing the wheel. If the source is important to the topic, it happens to be an author or it happens to be a document that everyone is using in the field, then usually that's a good place to put information. This is also true for legal information or for policy information. It's sometimes best to quote it verbatim. And then words are open to interpretation, and so it's necessary for your analysis because anytime you pick up a quote and you move it and put it in a different destination, you'll find that it's possible for the subject matter of the quote or the theme or the idea to change either slightly or even completely. There are times that you should avoid using quotes and data. In the papers and in your presentations themselves, that's typically in the introduction and conclusion. That's typically your thesis, and of course, in your topic sentences because they belong to you. Be careful not to overuse your quotes. Ideally, you don't want more than a third of your paper, but many of our professors at SPA are more interested in your voice and than they are the quotes that you are bringing in or the data that you are bringing in. And so they'll say 20 to 25% of your paper should be unoriginal content, that is to say, content that is coming from another source. Make sure that you don't plagiarize. If you have any questions, there is within this series another discussion in depth about plagiarism, but just note that oftentimes plagiarism is um, done inadvertently, and that can be often corrected by simply citing the right way in APA format. If you have questions, then by all means, please visit the Writing Center. When you're analyzing a quote, it's important to keep a strong voice, put the core ideas into your own words. So when you're analyzing another author's words, they're not speaking for you, they're supporting you. And you can find new meaning if you take those words and identify them separately. If you're using a pen and paper, circle and underline keywords and phrases. Same thing in the book, right in the margins. But if you happen to be on a digital platform, then it's okay to bold certain words or change them to a different color and review them separately. Once you've done that, write down what you have said and then try to create new sentences out of them. You might find that a simple quote allows you to unpack more than a page of thoughts. Review the possible meaning of any descriptions to uncover the author's original meaning. Take a look at their original intent, especially if you're looking at a historical document, but also remember that what you're putting together is led by your voice and your perspective, supported by evidence-based research, rather than any opinion that you might harbor. Make sure to paraphrase when appropriate, and that means cite appropriately. Use summaries and use personal anecdotes when appropriate. If you need to add some sort of flavor to your paper that gives authenticity to the voice, or you want to gain an understanding of what people are saying or how our society is responding, then personal anecdotes and summaries can be very effective to do that. It's a form, there are many ways to write a paper. Short examples and forms of storytelling, but also case studies can be very helpful in illustrating the points that you'd like to use and return to later. There's a few misconceptions that a lot of students have when it comes to quoting, and so I'd like to dispel some of them here. Quotes do not have to be long, but everything must be analyzed. So the length of a quote can be a few words, or a quote may indeed be a block quote, a full paragraph that is 6 to 8 lines long. That's okay, but what's important is that you are proportionate in your response and you allow us to understand what does the quote have to do with the context of the situation. Also, quotes do not have to be said by somebody with an important reputation. We are much more interested in making the appropriate connections, and expertise comes not from someone with a famous name that everybody knows, but somebody qualified to speak upon the position. And so if you provide us with historical background, or you provide us with any knowledge that's within the context of the environment, that might be more helpful to us than picking a famous quote that might be considered cliche or might have been analyzed to death. When you're creating strong contextual relationships, present your analysis in the context of your argument. And so a lot of the time, a quote is very good for supporting your ideas by allowing it to give the reader a perspective that they may not have considered before, but also it might allow us to more smoothly understand how all of the different pieces to your paper, project, or presentation fit together. So while you're integrating it, you want to mention the author's name or the title of the work. You can mention the author's credentials. You can add an introductory analysis to the author. And also, you can change small things about what an author says in the text with use of brackets, or you can also use ellipses to connect two pieces together that you may not have previously done. Use internal and external information to provide a full picture of the topic. When we talk about context, a lot of that concerns scope and scale. You want to focus on what is the scale of the topic that you want to discuss and how much of the different environmental factors need to be considered. So what you should always do is provide us with, start with those journalistic questions of the who, what, where, when, why. This pertains to how many, how much, to what degree something happens to be true. You're essentially giving us an evaluation, and you can do that effectively if you let us know just how broad our approach should be, or conversely, how deep we should go into any given topic. You can always add a twist to keep things interesting. You can be creative in the application of quoted material. You can talk about what is surprising about the information that's being critiqued. You can figure out multiple ways to pique your reader's interest. Sometimes you can do that by shocking them. Sometimes you can do that by inspiring them. Sometimes it's done through storytelling. Other times it's done by finding effective solutions to social problems and seeing progress being made in areas that are important to you or important to your target audience. So one of the things that comes with all of this is practice and making sure that you have a full understanding of all the different factors that are in your project. However, you should consider that your project uh, is going to grow and develop and change as you're writing it, as you're creating it. And that's a great thing. If you start your paper with a question and that question leads to more questions, that's typically the right direction to go. And that's usually when you want to consider scope and scale. A lot of the time, for a two-page paper, the problem isn't that the paper is too large to fill, it's that there's too much information to conceivably put into such a small space. On the other end, do you have enough information to write a 10-page paper or to write a long 20-page or 20-minute PowerPoint presentation? You have to consider these things through practice in your own style and approach to your studies. Consider that facts matter. You want to build on a solid foundation. Evidence-based research is what we're looking for, not opinion. Keep the integrity of the information and apply the information that's most important. You want to consider different methods of argument and appeal. Oftentimes, facts that are presented to us are not just presented to us in a state that is without direction. Normally, they're not neutral. They might be presented in a logical way. Maybe the facts that are presented are designed as an ethical appeal to talk about what is right or moral in a society. Further, it could be that it's an emotional appeal. The people are trying to connect with their audience by presenting facts that will move the audience to want to act. And then also consider what's the purpose of the facts that are being presented? What's the purpose of the argument that is being presented? If we happen to know that there's an argument is complicated, then it can be really beneficial to understand the different wants and needs of the audience members who are making those arguments in the first place and who's receiving them. Continued evaluation of facts are the foundation of journalism. They're the foundation of science, and they are the foundation of higher education. And we work with the idea of transparency and accountability as ways to ensure the integrity of the profession and the information that we collectively are building towards. Students who come into the school are joining that tradition, and many will continue to go on and do these and keep these same foundations of integrity when they go into the professional fields. So the foundation of this particular seminar is the idea that if you understand how to spot fake news, if you understand how to research appropriately, and if you understand the purpose of the research that you're attempting to do, then you'll oftentimes be able to navigate treacherous waters when when information is obscure or not quite clear yet, or there's a lot of contradictory information. These skills are something that you develop over time across all professions, But one of the ways that SPA students can get the most from their own work is to be able to effectively navigate and have confidence in their research skills. If you happen to have any information that you'd like more, inf if you happen to have any information that you'd like to learn more about, please let me know. My name is Terry Hall. You can make an appointment to visit the Writing Center, and the email address is listed below at tlh135@newark.rutgers.edu. The website is also attached. If you happen to have anything that you would like more information on, please make an appointment, and I hope that you enjoy your day. Take care.